All right. Hmm. All right, welcome, folks. Good morning. Welcome to Chassidus. Um, just a brief moment here. All righty. Okay. So, the verse says that God commands us his his words to us, his laws to us, which we explain in two ways. One is like you know, why is it that a parent should tell their children, do as I do, not as I say? Well, because that's what God does. Part of the honor that the Torah says that we need to give to parents, one of the commentators explains that the reason is because they're for a child like God, right? And we do treat our parents, in a manner that way, right? Young, I mean, not when they became teenagers. I don't mean that. A different story, right? Um, but little kids, they do that. There's something to it. What's to it is, well, when you honor your parents in such a manner, then you'll be able to honor God. So um, we reflect godliness. In other words, God puts on tefillin, so we put on tefillin. God gives charity, so we put on charity. And now, of course, He does it without the physical limitations. But the idea of why does God want me to put on tefillin? Because it's important to Him. Well, it's important to Him, so obviously He does it, right? Why does a parent want a child to do something? Because it's important to them. Well, if it's important to them, obviously they do it too. So God's not, and this understanding, um, we we put on tefillin to reflect God. We give charity to reflect God. We keep the Sabbath to reflect God because He does all of it. It's important to Him. Well, if it's important to Him, so it's important to me, right? But it's not just important to Him because He tells me to do it. It's important to Him because He does it. God keeps the Sabbath. Now, what that means, actually, we just had it in the JLI class, um, the Kabbalah of meaning. We just explained about it, right? He keeps it Obviously not in a physical way like we do. He's not eating the best foods. He's not making kiddush with a cup with wine physically. But what the idea of Shabbos is, very much so. The idea of Shabbos is that God animates the world from thought rather than his word. It's more internal. That's what Shabbos is. It's deeper, it's more internal. So God's keeping it. And therefore, we keep it. That's the first explanation. The second explanation, which is, whoa, pretty. I mean, the first one, that makes sense. We get that. But here, the second one is that, no, no, because we keep the mitzvah, so that affects God to keep the mitzvah. And this is even greater than the first explanation. Now, by the way, it doesn't take away from the first explanation. They're both true. Now, what does this mean? It means, well, let me give you a metaphor down here. Yeah, and the metaphor of the parent telling the child, do as I do. So when the parent says, don't speak ill of your friend, right? And a parent doesn't speak ill of their friend or of their let's use a sibling, right? You shouldn't speak ill of your sibling. So a parent who would speak ill of their sibling, obviously they're doing as I say, not as I do, but they too, because it's important to them, so they don't speak ill to about their sibling. That doesn't mean if you have an issue with your sibling, you don't deal with it. I'm talking about speaking ill, right? You got frustrated, so you went and told, ah, nah, right? That's not good. You got triggered, own your frustration, deal with it. Don't speak ill about your sibling. Parent doesn't, it's important to them. So they teach their kids, don't speak ill. You have something, an issue? Okay. That'd be dealt with. That doesn't mean you have to speak ill about them. Now, what happens? Let's play it the other way. That the child who's frustrated and knows that this is not what to be done and holds back from their frustration and doesn't speak ill about their sibling. And the parent sees that, is witness to it, of the struggle and 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 the child, won the game of holding back. What does that do to the parent? It arouses in them that this idea of not speaking ill in a much deeper place in them than if it would have just come on their own. This is the concept of an awakening from below awakens above in a greater way that above precedes on its own, right? So imagine, just think about it. Your child struggled with this, that wasn't so gewaltig, as they say, wasn't so wonderful experience, and was able to have self-control. And you saw that. Wouldn't that awaken in you that if let's say you were struggling with something about your sibling and that you would now be able to hold back because you'd be, wow, My child did it. Of course, I could do it too. Now that's just a metaphor. Of course, there's holes in the metaphor to apply this to God, right? Because God doesn't have the trouble of holding back as maybe the parent does. And even if the parent didn't have trouble, let's say, but it still um, awakens in the parent something that, wow, my child, I'm impressed with them. And it will awaken in the parent, even though they might not be struggling, an appreciation of this idea of, don't speak ill of your sibling to bring it into a deeper place. Well, guess what, folks? That's what happens when we do a mitzvah. We awaken in God, in Him, in a deeper place than if God did the mitzvah on His own. We're charitable. That's an awakening from below that awakens above. That God is charitable even more than He would be on His own. That's an amazing thing. So God's charity is greater when we do charity. God's kindness is greater when we do kindness. We affect that above. Just let that sink in for a moment. Like, who thinks that way? Who even cares that? Only Chassidus can teach you this. Like, think about it. Like, okay, but yeah, that's the power we have. That's the power of, in the end, it's God's mitzvah. God allows Himself to be affected in such a way, makes Him so vulnerable to us. So, we've been speaking about, before God, there's no past, present, and future. So my actual fulfillment of a mitzvah is, before God, it's there. Yet at the same time, it's not the same as if I did it in actuality, rather than, it's before God. And, I yet didn't do it down here, right? I'm learning right now, but before I learn, before God, before I'm learning and teaching right now, right? You're learning right now. So before we did this, before God, it was present because there's no before God, past, present, or future, right? We have that limitation. Yet, the fact that I did the mitzvah right now of learning, of teaching, in actuality, right? Um, that is greater than before God. I'm not talking about for us, obviously for us, the fact that we did it, right, is greater before God than it is before we did it in actuality, as it was that God is not lacking um, you know, a timeline, right? We have a timeline. Before God, there's no timeline. That's very powerful. Well, there's more here. I mean, we went through this, but I guess We're going to leave it here for now. Just let that sink in. I think it's important to let it sink in. How powerful that is, how unique this idea is. That doesn't exist. In the Talmud, it exists, but not in a clear way that you can appreciate it until Chassidus came in and elaborated as we have just done. All right, folks, we'll see you soon. So, I have a funeral. So we're going to do Chumash Rashi, and we're going to do Tanya probably a few minutes before the time, before 9:30. And it's going to be short Tanya. There won't be Rambam, just because of the funeral too.